To learn more about earning college credits with study hall courses, visit gostudyhall.com or click the link in the description. There are many lenses we can use to look at conflicts like World War I and World War II. We can focus in on long lists of battles and important people. We can study international politics to try to understand what motivated the wars in the first place, like we did in our last episode. Or we can hone in on something smaller, but no less significant: the people on the ground. By understanding the human costs of conflict, we can understand how these global wars not only reshaped politics, but drastically changed the lives of everyday people everywhere. Hi, I'm Rob Fuller, and this is Study Hall, Modern World History. One way to figure out the human impact of a conflict is by looking at the casualty records. But there's a catch. War is, really bad for record keeping, and our casualty records likely understate the sheer amount of death in these conflicts. But even without the exact numbers, we know that World War I was brutal for both sides. The Triple Entente, which included the USSR, France, and Britain, as well as the Central Powers, aka Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, both racked up casualties at a breakneck pace. For example, during the Battle of the Somme in July 1916, the British Army lost 20,000 soldiers on the first day alone. Despite the massive casualties, military leaders resumed attacks the next day, and the next day, and the next. And all in all, the Battle of the Somme lasted over 4 months and led to more than 300,000 deaths. Over the course of World War I, the Central Powers lost 4 million soldiers, while the Triple Entente lost about 5.7 million. Taken together, that's like if the entire population of Seoul, South Korea, was suddenly wiped off the map today. Both the Central Powers and the Triple Entente were willing to do whatever it took to stop the other, even if that meant sacrificing the lives of millions of soldiers on the battlefield and even more civilian lives back at home. The war spilled into unlucky towns along the front lines, and the people living there were caught in the crossfire. And while civilians often pay the price for imperial conflict, some historians estimate that 13 million civilians died in World War I, which is more than any other war up to that point. Militaries also set up blockades to keep supplies from reaching their enemies, which made things even worse for civilians. These blockades meant that munitions, raw materials, first aid supplies, and even food couldn't reach their destination, and as a result, hundreds of thousands of civilians died of hunger and malnutrition in Germany alone. Consequently, many people abandoned their homes to survive. But as they moved around, folks encountered another recurring historical character: disease. During World War I, crowded and unsanitary military camps made it easy to spread illnesses like influenza, and as soldiers and civilians moved around, so did the disease. Countries that had escaped the direct combat of World War I, like those in Central and South America, couldn't duck the flu. And this wasn't just any cold. This virus was 25 times more deadly than the average flu bug. And like most things in society, the ravages of the flu disproportionately affected people who already lived in poverty. So while somewhere between 11 and 20 million soldiers and civilians died as a direct result of World War I, once we start to factor in the indirect consequences of things like the blockade and the 1918 influenza pandemic, that number more than doubles. All this made World War I one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. Until World War II came along. This war reignited old alliances, with the US, Britain, the Soviet Union, and other European countries forming the Allies, while Germany, Italy, and Japan made up the Axis powers. Both of these alliances relentlessly bombed civilians, which was exactly as gruesome as it sounds. The Blitz is a well-known German bombing campaign of cities in the United Kingdom, lasting from 1940 to 1941. Then, in 1942, the Allies retaliated by flying raids on German cities. And in 1943, the British Royal Air Force dropped firebombs on the city of Hamburg, which resulted in a firestorm that killed about 40,000 people in just one night. And when the United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, more than 80,000 people were killed, and many more experienced health effects that lasted for decades afterwards. All in all, somewhere between 60 and 75 million people died during World War II. Civilians in the USSR and China were hit particularly hard, while an estimated 7 million colonized people around the globe died of starvation. And on top of this, millions of civilians were systematically exterminated by Nazi Germany in one of the most infamous atrocities in human history, that of the Holocaust. After their defeat in World War I, Germany was forced to accept total responsibility for its actions and to repay other countries that it had harmed. Some Germans, including Nazi Party leader Adolf Hitler, saw this as a global humiliation on the world stage. So instead of owning their actions, they looked for someone else to blame. Rumors started swirling that Germany lost the war because of other people who undermined Germany from the inside, especially Jews. For Hitler, being Jewish wasn't just an identity or a religion, he saw it as a fundamental flaw in a person's biology. We call this belief anti-Semitism, and it's just another form of racism. Hitler bought into this anti-Semitic conspiracy, which was fueled by mass media. He was especially obsessed with the idea that those of European Christian descent were superior to Jews in every way, and he became fanatical about it. Hitler decided that German Jews needed to be eliminated from the country to give more power to Aryans, or the white European races. This is an outgrowth of nationalism, or the identification with one's own cultural group, and the support for its success. In this case, the fabricated idea of the Aryan race to the detriment of another. In this case, the Jews, as well as the Roma and other non-Aryan groups. And Hitler brought the full might of the German military behind his toxic, terrifying ideology. Nazi soldiers rounded up Jews across Germany and its occupied territories and transported them to concentration camps where they were starved, beaten, tortured, and murdered in large-scale gas chambers. Historians estimate that the Nazis killed at least 6 million European Jews. But as Hitler pushed his potent mix of nationalism and eugenics, the Nazi Party also executed other groups who fell outside Hitler's image of an ideal Aryan race, including the Roma, LGBTQ folks, those with mental and physical disabilities, and really anyone who stood in the way of the Nazi cause. And while any large-scale murder or annihilation can be called a Holocaust, we refer to this specific event as the Holocaust. And it's still remembered as one of the largest genocides in human history. Looking at the human cost of war helps us to understand the real price of conflict, and the effects of the two world wars and the Holocaust would reverberate throughout European culture for decades to come. But life changed dramatically for those outside Europe too. These were, after all, world wars. Take the United States. Separated from Europe by the Atlantic Ocean, civilians still mobilized to support the Allied cause during the two world wars. Many civilians signed up to be part of the merchant marines during both World War I and World War II, sailing on merchant ships to ensure the safe delivery of goods, a job that turned out to be deadly. In World War II, about 10,000 merchant marines died, at a rate of about 1 in 26. And since men were off fighting on the front lines, other marginalized people, like women, had to shoulder the weight of their absence, giving them the opportunity to gain new independence and autonomy. During World War I, women stepped up to provide crucial labor, serving as nurses, translators, and ambulance drivers on the front lines. And back at home, women entered the workforce in droves, taking on traditionally male jobs in agriculture, factories, and shipyards. Women entered the political sphere in increasing numbers too. Social movement leaders like Jane Addams and Mary Church Terrell not only campaigned for suffrage or the right to vote, but stood up for other political causes too. Addams spoke up about the global cost of World War I, and as the national chair of the Women's Peace Party, she pushed for diplomacy and international cooperation, while Terrell helped found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the National Association of Colored Women, and the National Association of University Women. But when the war ended and soldiers returned to home soil, countries wanted things to go back to business as usual. The women who had shouldered the workforce were now laid off in huge numbers. But women weren't going to give up their newfound freedoms that easily. And although the fight for women's suffrage in the United States had been in motion since the 1840s, it was the advances made during World War I by activists like Addams and Terrell, as well as Alice Paul and Carrie Chapman Catt, that finally led to the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. This amendment finally granted women the right to vote, although voter suppression for non-white voters was still rampant. And this movement wasn't unique to the United States. Women across the world were granted additional voting rights in the wake of World War I, including those in Britain and Germany. And it wasn't just women gaining their overdue independence. Long colonized people across the globe also won freedom from their imperial rulers in the aftermath of World War II. While they were forced to fight for their colonizers during the conflict, some nations like India struck up bargains stating that they would help the war effort in exchange for their independence. Anti-imperial protest movements spread across the regions as well. This move for freedom from imperial rule was spurred along by the fall of European and US colonies to Japan early in World War II, which had the effect of shaking the image of these empires as all-powerful rulers, like gods or your Instagram algorithm. And by the time that end rolled around, many empires were too weak, economically, politically, and reputationally, to keep their colonies in line. And as the dust cleared after World War II, places like India, Pakistan, Ceylon, and Burma finally received independence from British imperial rule. And other empires did the same. France ceded control of Vietnam, and even the US got in on the action and granted the Philippines independence in 1946. So while civilians paid a heavy price in both World War I and World War II, in some instances, these sacrifices gave marginalized people across the globe just the leverage they needed to break free of the oppressive status quo. The aftermath of these wars left the world with a lot of rebuilding to do. And not just the buildings and cities destroyed by violence, but the trust between governments and their citizens too. To pacify these citizens, many governments turned their focus away from conflict and colonialism and began improving the quality of life at home, creating more public services and giving trade unions a voice in how private companies were run. People were given new rights to participate in civic and economic life, like suffrage. The two world wars vastly restructured the political world, and the sheer amount of death and destruction they caused was devastating. But in the wake of all that violence were seeds of progress, however incremental, leading into the latter half of the 20th century. If you're enjoying Study Hall Modern World History and are interested in taking an online course and earning college credits, visit gostudyhall.com or click on this button to learn more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.